citizens, we've made it to Nindie Nation episode 100. I'm Jeff, and if this is your first time stopping by, boy do we have a show for you. Nindie Nation is your one-stop weekly shop for everything independently developed for the Nintendo Switch. This week we're covering every indie game hitting the eShop from January 24th through the 31st. And after that, we'll go check out the best digital deals available to help you find just the thing to keep your Joy-Cons synced. Since it's episode 100, I asked all of you to write in, so after all the new Nindies and all the cheap Nindies, we'll sit down for a little fireside chat. Big news! We just launched a Discord. You've asked for it, and what better time than the start of a new Nindie Centennial? The link is over in my Twitter bio and will be in all future YouTube descriptions, so come join us. New episodes of Nindie Nation hit YouTube on Tuesdays, and if you'd rather listen, we have an audio feed hosted by our friends at the Nintendo Village. Keep up to date with all things in the Nation of Nindie by following us on Twitter at Nindie Nation. We've got part 3 of the Best Nindies of 2020 series coming later this week. And finally, if you want to have a fun time checking out new indies with great people, stop by the Nindies Nite stream this Thursday at 10 p.m., where we'll be kicking off the evening with Cyber Shadow. As I mentioned at the top, we've got a big show this week with a lot of games. And I'm pleased to say that even though there's always a few indies that slip through the cracks between our episodes, this week has a great batch to discuss. So without further ado, let's kick off episode 100 by taking a look at the 13 neglected Nindies that released since episode 99. First up is a port of The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past to the original Game Boy. Wait, what? That's not what this is? Could have fooled me. I really don't know any other way to describe this. Timothy and the Mysterious Forest is the newest title to release from Cubic Games, and their track record is strong enough for me to suggest this is probably a solid release, worth the on-sale price of $4.99. The one wrench they throw in the mix is that Timothy can die in one hit, and so the whole game has this air of a slower pace with some stealth mechanics. I kinda wish that wasn't the case personally, but I'm sure there's an audience for this one nonetheless. Speaking of classic Nintendo franchises, Star Fox fans, listen up. 34 Big Things also wishes Nintendo would give Fox and the crew one more chance to
do a barrel roll.
And they've taken it upon themselves to create the RedOut series, which takes what makes the Star Fox series great and gives it a modern sci-fi paint job. This week, they port their mobile version of the game, RedOut Space Assault, to the Switch and release it for $9.99. Now, this is the mobile version, but I think for the price, and especially if you plan to play this in handheld mode, that's a good thing because of the way it's structured for fun, short bursts of play with upgrades and collectibles throughout. The RedOut series is really fun, and as long as this performs well on the Switch, I'd say consider picking this one up for some excellent third-person space shooter action. If you joined us for Nindies Nite last week, you'll remember that we spontaneously checked out a little, game called Loot Hero DX that slipped past the new releases just after last week's episode recorded. It's a $4 title by RedOut, and it's something else. I don't even know what you call it. I guess it's a roguelike. You just run left and right, occasionally stopping to press a button and upgrade your character. It's hilarious, but not really in a good way, and we beat the game twice over in about 20 minutes. This game probably just exists for trophy and achievement hunters, and while we had some good laughs at its expense, it's a tough one to recommend. But RedOut's other release on this list does look pretty fun. I've yet to try it myself, but we can take a look on Thursday if you want. Balance-Lot, or Balance-A-Lot, or Balance-A-Lot, wow, solid multi-entendre use there, guys, is a medieval puzzle adventure with a storybook visual style, and this $6 title will have you wielding a lance while riding a unicycle through all sorts of physics challenges on your way to the King's Jousting Tournament. The developers at Anvil Bird and Jestercraft claim to have riddled the game with witty humor, and I'm looking forward to playing this one for myself. Time for a couple spookies. So take note that if you're a recent visitor of Nindie Nation, I'm a big old baby, and I usually don't play scary games, but I'll do my best to tell you what to expect. Pinview Drive released for $20 from UIG Entertainment, and it's a first-person puzzle adventure about exploring a spooky old mansion where the caretaker's wife mysteriously vanished 20 years ago. It gives you a 30-day cycle to unravel the mystery and gives off vibes similar to Myst, but, spookier. And Joe's Diner is a game that you might have heard in the news recently, as it was one of the few PS4 games that wasn't compatible on the PS5, but was just patched to now be playable on my $500 console with terrible save management, minimal upgrades to last-gen games, and a noisy controller. But that's for another discussion. Joe's Diner is basically the exact same premise as Pinview Drive, but you're exploring a haunted diner built on top of an Indian cemetery. It's $20, and as someone who lived for 2 years in a house built on top of former Native American grounds, I can tell you I have no desire to bring those feelings of supernatural wariness back anytime soon. But both of these games do look pretty cool. If Final Fantasy XV was heralded as a boy band road trip, well, strap in because Neoverse Trinity Edition is Tino Games' take on the Spice Girls on an anime-inspired sci-fi cyber quest to rid the world of evil and look fantastic doing it. The structure alone makes me assume this was ported from a mobile game, but what I'm seeing from the card-based battle system is reminding me of the classic Batten Kaitos series, and those games taught me to never again turn my nose up from anything just because of card mechanics. We haven't seen much from Tino Games in the past, so for $24, it's a bit of a gamble, but it looks like a fairly competent JRPG with nice visuals that I'd never play within eyesight of others, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the reviews pan out for this one. Before we dive into this week's Nindie No-Nos, allow me to introduce a title that can only be referred to as a Nindie.
Oh, hell no.
Now, we see a lot of shameless anime schoolgirl romance games, and of course we've seen the recent surge of the games that love to say,
"This game is for girls."
But this one takes the cake in all of the worst ways. Her Love in the Force by publisher Voltage describes their game with,
"Don't push yourself too hard. You can be yourself with me. Join the Public Safety Police Academy and dive into a world of men. In pursuit of your dreams of becoming a detective, your supervisor encourages you to enter the Public Safety Police Academy. But as it turns out, this school is full of elite and ruthless officers from around the country. Will you survive?"
Upon further investigation, no pun intended, this game is about a woman who joins the police and is quickly subjected to relentless sexual violence from all of the men working around her, and your goal is to make it out of the game alive, before the men who are constantly using their power to assault you kill you. This game is built as a fantasy, and I'm usually all about freedom and lack of censorship and yada yada yada, but this is just disgusting and can only further encourage behavior like this to continue in our society. Voltage and their $25 sex abuse fantasy can all the way off. There goes 2 downvotes. I'll get off my soapbox now. Okay. Now it's time for the Nindie No-Nos, the shameless, effortless games that can in no way come recommended by Nindie Nation. This week, we've got 5 games to point and laugh at, and the first one is, well, those games that are constantly advertised on social media? The puzzle games where you pull the keys and try to get the character to the treasure without dropping lava on them, or the treasure itself? I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. One of those made its way to the Switch this week thanks to Max Interactive Studio. It's called Little Squire's Quests. It released for $4.95, and if I could make one of those puzzle games, I'd put this game in one of the bottom quadrants, Max Interactive Studio in the other, and make the solution to the puzzle dropping
Liquid hot magma
on both of them. Max also released Shinobi Blade last week, and it's not quite as offensive, but it's just Super Meat Boy or any other similar platformer with a cheap mobile art style slapped on it. For $5, there's no reason to give this publisher any money because they'll just use it to keep bringing more crap like this to the Switch.
Dirt Bike Insanity is yet another dirt bike motocross game by Ultimate Games, and it looks just like every dirt bike racing game. Come on down to the swamps of the eShop this Sunday, and get low-quality visuals, low-budget performance, and so many hills, bumps, ramps, and turns, you'll wish you spent $8 on a cheeseburger.
The last two Nindie no-nos would get themselves in this list regardless, but they make it here with flying colors because neither of them support TV mode. I mean, if you're gonna just port a crappy mobile game to the Switch, you could at least put a smidgen of effort into it. But alas, Your Fried Chicken Games brought Battle for Blood over, and this $4 Match 3 puzzle game is completely indistinguishable from the thousands already available for free on your phone. But then Digital Game Group was like,
"You think you got the most shameless mobile garbage this week? Huh. Hold my beer."
Because they just ported Cupcake Match, one of the thousands of Candy Crush clones out there, and decided to charge an offensive $7.99. My review of Cupcake Match is... I just did that with my hands and I feel like a 7-year-old. You know, Ultimate Games does publish good games from time to time, so it's a shame to see so much garbage from them recently. But these other publishers, Your Funnel Cake Games and Digital Game Group, they are the epitome of shovelware. Sometimes I wonder why I get the occasional thumbs down on Nindie Nation videos, and honestly, I like to think that it's these companies' marketing or PR people hearing how they are represented on the show. If you're listening, stewards of shovelware, know that the world would be a better place if your company wasn't in it. There's a couple more thumbs downs. Going for a record this week. Episode 100, why not? Oh, a quick note. You may have seen the Game Maker engine known as Pixel Game Maker release a player on the Switch recently, similar to the Fuse platform a couple weeks back. They've recently started releasing standalone games for a few bucks each, but for the time being, I'm choosing not to cover them on Nindie Nation, mostly to keep the episode length in check. My ultimate plan is to play a bunch of these and make some kind of content that highlights which ones are noteworthy. If you are listening and you make some of these maker games, or you've played a few and you think some of them are worth a spotlight, tell me in the YouTube comments or toss me a DM on Twitter because I'm compiling a list. If you've seen those games on the eShop and wonder why we're not covering them, now you know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
Are we on a roll or what, citizens? Besides the no-nos, that's one of the best lists of neglected Nindies we've had. Let me know if anything's jumping out to you, and if you'd like to see one of these on a future Nindies at Night. Looking ahead to next week, we've got another big week of releases and a couple of highly anticipated Nindies that I know will keep all of our Joy-Cons synced. These are the 26 Nindies hitting the eShop from January 25th through the 31st. The lone release kicking off the week on Monday the 25th is Solus 128 from Armor Games Studio. It looks like the culmination of every hacking minigame ever, all rolled into one massive puzzle where you control the flow of electricity, lights, lasers, and all that other stuff. Things seem to get pretty intense, so I don't think it's for the faint of heart. It's also not cheap at $14.99, but there's probably more here than you'll be able to work your way through. And if $15 is out of your budget, well, throw it on the wish list and come back later when it's on sale. On January 26th, Ultimate Games publishes a family-friendly puzzle adventure called Ziggy the Chaser for $7.99. The artwork and visuals overall aren't what you'd call impressive, but the top-down gameplay of exploring and collecting crystals could be fun for kids. Thankfully, PixArt's only managed to squeeze one turd onto the eShop this week, and it's called Zombie Apocalypse. If you hate yourself and you want punishment worse than pulling your toenails off with pliers, this might be a good fit. It's not the worst game I've ever... well, yeah, it's pretty bad. It doesn't even matter that it's $4 because nobody should buy it. I swear someday they're gonna send ninjas after me or something. But something I think a lot of you are going to end up buying this week is the title that is, without a doubt, Nindie Nation's Pick of the Week. Cyber Shadow has been living rent-free in the back of my mind, slowly working its way up since its first unveiling at PAX East 2019. At the time, the game had just been picked up by Yacht Club Games, the developers of Shovel Knight. It seemed ready for release, but now this is total speculation on my part. I think Yacht Club saw the potential in Mechaskull, the game's solo developer, and provided the resources and assistance he needed to make the game everything that it could be. Listen to me, I'm sitting here getting ready to tell you it's Game of the Year, and I haven't even played it yet. It's an 8-bit ninja game that includes elements borrowed from Ninja Gaiden, Castlevania, Mega Man, and many others to culminate in over a dozen boss fights, snaking paths within levels, and plenty of room for backtracking as you hone your cyber ninja's skills. Similar to Ninja Gaiden, the game's story is told through unbelievably beautiful animated cutscenes, as well as interstitial storytelling within the levels themselves. I think Cyber Shadow was on its way to being a pretty great game, but then Yacht Club provided Mechaskull the resources he needed to turn it into one of the potential greats. Last year, the 8-bit retro game that blew me away was Panzer Paladin, and in 2021, I think it's going to be hard to beat Cyber Shadow. The game is launching on Xbox Game Pass in case you want to play it there, but otherwise, if you're as hyped for it as I am, you can pick it up when it launches on Tuesday the 26th for $19.99. And just in case it needs to be said, yes, this is what we're playing during this week's Nindies at Night. And although I'm sure I'll be well into the game itself by Thursday, I'll start a brand new save file just to make sure we don't spoil anything. On January 27th, we've got 3 games releasing, the first of which looks like all kinds of ridiculous fun. Project Starship X is a 16-bit vertical scrolling shoot-'em-up that turns all kinds of genre conventions on its head for the sake of comedy. It's $10, it's published by East Asia Soft, and is developed by Panda Indie Studio, who made last year's Null Drifter, a title featured on the next part of our Best of 2020 series. Suffice it to say, I'm already sold on this one. It's got colorful 16-bit graphics, and you control a tentacled starship called Swagthulu that eschews actual guns for throwing spoons, bowling if the occasion fits, and just ramming into all of these pesky do-gooders trying to stop you. What's more is that Project Starship X features procedurally generated levels, roguelike mechanics, and very light RPG elements. Next up, Daedalic Entertainment went out and bought them 2 games based on the classic pen and paper role-playing series, The Dark Eye. They're both point-and-click adventures meant to help you explore the worlds already established in the series. The Dark Eye Chains of Satinav and The Dark Eye Memoria feature gorgeous artwork and some really cool fantasy settings, and they launch for $19.99 each. The big Thursday drop this week features a dozen of the most diverse games I've ever seen release in a single day. First off, we have Strange Field Football by Nindie newcomers Wild Bus Studio, and while they won't say it in their description, I will tell you this game is their attempt to revitalize the classic Techno series, featuring games like Super Dodgeball and Crashin' the Boys Street Challenge from the NES. It's got cute pixel art characters and a game of soccer where the rules are thrown out the window in favor of encouraging total unmitigated chaos. If you're a fan of classic arcade-style sports games, or especially fond of those retro Technos titles, this might be a fun nostalgic pick for $6.99. Marchin' Forest is a bit of a challenge to nail down. It's a top-down RPG with anime chibi characters that looks to have some limited platforming and a turn-based combat system with some active elements. There's not a ton to go off of here, and I haven't seen Clouded Leopard Entertainment pop up on the eShop before. The camera seems way too zoomed in for my tastes, as it makes every scene feel very claustrophobic, and the whole mystical anime woodland children vibe isn't one that I'm particularly feeling. So I'll say if you're willing to shell out $35 to roam around in a magical forest, you might want to check out the reviews first. Inkle is the team behind the award-winning puzzle adventure 80 Days that released a few years ago, and now they're back with another widely acclaimed, visually striking narrative puzzle adventure called Heaven's Vault. It mixes themes of archaeological sci-fi with a goal of deciphering a lost language, and it takes place in an alternate timeline Middle East where you're solving super complicated puzzles as the narrative unfolds around you. The critics do seem to love this one, so if you're all about the engrossing stories that will have you constantly rattling your noggin, Heaven's Vault for $17.99 and its 20 plus hours of gameplay, might be just the thing to keep your Joy-Cons synced. Now here's one that speaks to me. Sword of the Necrodancer takes the fluid visuals reminiscent of Moonlighter or Hyperlight Drifter and wraps them around a story not unlike Shadow of the Colossus. In this action RPG by Grimoire of Games, you'll explore a large open world as well as underground dungeons in search of a way to revive your lost loved one. The unique shtick here is that your Sword of Revival can also bring back the enemies you've slain to create an army of monsters that will fight alongside you. For $15, color me intrigued as is, but then they throw in procedurally generated levels, rogue-like mechanics, and RPG elements! And what can I say? Sword of the Necromancer is quite the compelling proposition. If you're like me, citizens, this is shaping up to be a pretty expensive week. The team at No Gravity Games have another great-looking title releasing this week with Golden Force, which drops with a 20% discount for $15.99. It's a fast-paced action platformer with equal parts insane combo-driven hack-and-slash action, as well as plenty of wall-jumping, air-dashing platforming. The art style is very bright and colorful, reminding me of the earlier pixel art Shantae series, or maybe some more recent games like Metalloid Origin or Underhero, and it features 2-player couch co-op if you want to hack it up with a friend. I should state that the Metacritic scores are all over the place with this one, with quite a few 80s and 90s, but quite a few failing scores as well. I'm not sure where all fall on that spectrum, but I've requested a code for it, and if it comes in, we'll throw Golden Force into the mix for this week's Nindies Nite. And winning the award for
game most likely to get overlooked in the shadow of Cyber Shadow
is Olija, which is a retro-inspired action platformer by Skeleton Crew Studios. Olija looks to do a lot of things right. Its premise is based on the classic Asian tale Faraday's Quest, and the visuals look very similar to Sword and Sorcery or, as I mentioned earlier, games like Moonlighter and Hyperlight Drifter, but with a distinct Asian folklore color palette. It's really cool looking. Gameplay-wise, you get fast, reflex-intensive ninja action, lots of platforming, and the always welcome grappling hook. In fact, it might not be too far off to say this could pass as a retro 2D take on Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I remember seeing a bit about Olija over the past few months, but it wasn't until preparing this week's episode that I really dug into it, and it appears to be a title that we might not want to miss. It's published by Devolver Digital, which always tells me two things. One, it's going to be an action-packed game of fairly high quality. And two, the part they probably don't want you to hear, while it launches for $14.99, it will regularly see a 50% price drop down to $7.49. Olija is going to the top of my wish list, and as soon as I get some time to check it out, I'll report back. Blazing Planet Studio is one of the developers who brought the recent lo-fi ping pong to the Switch, and if you caught that week's Nindies Nite, you saw a simple but effective game with a unique premise. Well, they're back this week and working with publisher Red Black Spade to release The Choice of Life Middle Ages for $4.99. Apparently, the whole gameplay loop is just making decisions based on cards that are presented to you. Like, you start out as a baby making decisions like learning to walk or talk first, and ultimately either becoming the leader of an evil empire or the ruler of a peaceful kingdom. So I guess you could say it's a choose-your-own-adventure. It sounds like a fun little distraction, but I can't imagine it's a game you'd be coming back to very often, and it would probably be much better suited on mobile where the team behind The Choice of Life has spent most of their time. Touhou, not to be confused with Touhou, is a classic narrative puzzle adventure that looks very similar to titles like Mechanarium. It's developed by the Irregular Corporation, who has a great track record with games like Murder by Numbers and Mars Horizon, and the soundtrack alone might be worth the $5 price of entry because it's composed by Hollow Knight's Christopher Larkin. The story follows a little girl exploring a bunch of fish planets, whatever that means, and learning more about her evil alter ego by solving all sorts of environmental puzzles. Big shout out to Prison Games for bringing us back down to a more realistic level of quality for the week, because I can't see anybody being interested in yet another half-assed mobile port of a tower defense game, especially when Royal Tower Defense is priced at $7.99. Thanks for keeping our expectations in check, Prison Games. And if that didn't lower expectations enough, how about the Binary family's latest release, Save Farty? Yeah, you heard that right. They describe this $7 release as a
trivia game as tasteless as the name implies.
It stars a bird whom I can only imagine is the titular Farty, and you answer trivia questions. That's it. Trivia. Here at Nindie Nation, though, we have an exclusive demo so you can try out the game for yourself. You ready? The question is,
which game is definitely not worth buying this week?
And your options are Cyber Shadow, Sword of the Necromancer, and Save Farty. If you answered Save Farty, you win the prize of not playing Save Farty.
Farty.
If you want to make it nearly impossible for someone to research your publishing studio, give it a name like Sold Out. Their game, however, Disjunction, looks pretty cool. It's a tech-noir story set in 2048 about 3 playable characters working to overturn a drug cartel. The gameplay is a top-down action RPG that appears to control like a twin-stick shooter, and there's a heavy emphasis on branching narratives based on the choices you make. I'm a bit hesitant to tell you to jump in just because it's $16 and from a fairly unknown publisher, but this is another one that might pop up in later episodes after we see how the reviews pan out. The team at Mango Protocol are diving back into their Psychotic Agatha webcomic series this week and releasing a traditional co-op beat-em-up with puzzle and adventure elements called Colossus Down for $17.99. It's very much got that flash animation visual style that was so popular in the early aughts, and the super dark, violent tone is present throughout, but the game does seem pretty competent even in an increasingly crowded genre, so if you're a fan of the web series it's based on, Colossus Down is probably another solid way to get more out of that world. How about that for an expensive Thursday? We're not done yet, as we've still got 7 games releasing on Friday, January 29th, but I wouldn't be too concerned about draining your digital wallet on this batch. First up, though, is the debut release by a 3-person team out of Norway called Studio Gauntlet, and in partnership with Crunching Koalas, they release Bonkies for $11.99. At this point, you know how I feel about
Zany multiplayer party games with a gimmick.
But this one is different. Bonkies is all about monkeys in space using all sorts of simple machines and physics mechanics to build space-faring, stuff, and it's very, very similar to the beloved Switch launch title, Snipperclips. The presentation is, as expected, pretty lighthearted and humorous throughout, and while it's built for 4 players, it claims to have plenty of solo content too. It's not the most original idea, but it is a new entry and one of the funniest ways to spend an afternoon with your friends on the couch. Boombit Games is releasing Cooking Festival for $11, but since their entire catalog is like a Groundhog Day of I could really have said that sentence any other given week. Publisher Onteca took every lame trope from the mobile game life simulator genre and wrapped them around a panda living on an island. They call that Chill Panda and are releasing it for $9.99. And here's what developer Hyperstrange says about their new $5 game Crossbow Blood Knight.
In the year 1139, the Second Council of the Lateran, convened by Pope Innocent II, has pronounced an anathema on the use of the crossbow.
And since I don't know what the any of that means, I'll tell you this game is basically Postal or Serious Sam, a super gory, crazy fast, first-person arena shooter with a cool Lovecraftian horror theme. It looks pretty fun for $5. And also for $5 is Radoleka's visual novel of the week. Developed by Winter Wolves Games, Vera Blanc, Ghost in the Castle, is a mystery/detective game about a woman who can read other people's minds. It uses a graphic novel art style and allows you to play with mini-games riddled throughout, or just by sticking to the visual novel formula.
Burn! Supertrucks!
Is an $8 monster truck racing game by Jorge Biedma Aswar. It's pretty bare bones, but would probably be fun for kids who love the Hot Wheels monster trucks that this game is clearly inspired by. And the last new release for the month of January 2021 is from Chili Dog Interactive, who released last week's Caves and Castles Underworld is primarily a Match 3 style puzzle game, but then it also throws in some elements of town building, and it wraps up the new releases for $4.99. What a week! So much great stuff to play. Cyber Shadow, Sword of the Necromancer, Heaven's Vault, Golden Force, Olija. What are you digging? Sound off in the YouTube comments, over on Twitter, or of course, we can now discuss in the brand new Discord server. I'm very pleased to say that after being very nervous about the deals on Friday night, lo and behold, Saturday came around with an awesome batch of deals, and while all of them are already at their lowest price ever, a bunch of them have reached a new all-time lowest price. We've still got your questions and comments to get into after this, so let's stall no longer, citizens. Here are the 9 Nindies on sale through at least January 29th. Super Crush KO is a wonderful game that doesn't go on sale often enough, so it's getting top billing this week. This incredibly fun, combo-driven action game comes to us from the team behind Graceful Explosion Machine, and it is a blast from start to finish, and then some. As one of our favorite Nindies of 2020, it goes without saying that you should definitely check out Super Crush KO while it's half off for just $7.50. Also on our Best of 2020 list is a game that hasn't been on sale for a while, and that's Fury Unleashed, the side-scrolling run-and-gun Nindie trifecta that's structured like a comic book and based on action movies of the 80s. You've got your procedurally generated levels, you've got your roguelike mechanics, and of course, RPG elements! As one of my most played games of 2020, I cannot recommend Fury Unleashed any more, especially when it's half off for $9.99. But if you need a bit of a taste first, there's a nice meaty demo on the eShop waiting for you right now. For those of you who dig the Metroidvania games, especially the Castlevania series that's on the Game Boy Advance and the DS, 3000th Duel should definitely be on your radar. It takes the big open world and adds in a very deep combat system alongside all of the backtracking and ability-driven platforming you've come to expect. It was a bit buggy on release, but it's since received a bunch of patches, and the developer has thrown in a ton of new content, which makes this a huge game that is well worth its half-off price of $7.49. One of probably the top 5 Nindies, if you ask me, is Dead Cells. It's very similar to Fury Unleashed, but with more pixel art and more of a Dark Souls vibe. The fast, fluid locomotion and constant progression creates some of the most addictive gameplay I've seen, and is the game that wins a lot of people over to the roguelike formula as a whole. The hook in Dead Cells is truly intoxicating, and other than Hades, is probably the primary recommendation for those of you who have yet to find a roguelike that grabs you. Motion Twin just released their first batch of paid DLC, and it is massive, on top of already 20+ new content drops released over the last 2 years. You can get it all in one massive bundle called the Dead Cells Fatal Seed Bundle that just released this week with a 33% discount for $19.99. Between this and Fury Unleashed, you'll certainly be able to satisfy your craving for procedurally generated levels, roguelike mechanics, and RPG elements! The Panzer Dragoon remake got a bad rap when it launched last year, and rightfully so, but the team at Forever Entertainment have since patched the game and it runs great now. If you like Star Fox, Rez, or any other on-rail shooters, you should check out the remake of what many consider to be the granddad of them all. Right now, the Panzer Dragoon remake is 75% off for just $6.24. A long-running joke from the early days of Nindie Nation was that 9 Parchments was always on sale. This is a top-down Diablo-like fantasy dungeon crawler with a pretty interesting story that comes with a big caveat. It is not for solo play. This game was clearly designed to be played with at least one other player, but you can play it locally or online with up to 4 players, and if you do, it's a great time. I'm including it this week mostly because while it's always on sale, for the first time in 3 years, 9 Parchments has reached a new lowest price ever, and at 75% off for $5, it's a great deal. And if you want to try it out first, there's a demo that you can pick up right now that allows for solo or co-op play online or off. A few weeks ago on Nindies Nite, we checked out Metalloid Origin and I gushed about how it's basically a Mega Man X revival, filled with excellent presentation, visuals, and audio design that unfortunately has a few missteps with bad but often funny translation and some occasional bugs. Well, those things are still there, but I just love the way this game adds in things like backtracking of levels and a fairly deep RPG system of character progression, much more than you'd see in classic games it's inspired by. It's a little janky, but it definitely scratches that Mega Man itch, so at $349, a 50% discount, I still think it's very much worth playing. And back in early December, we saw the release of Morbid, The 7 Acolytes, and while I haven't played this horror punk action RPG gorefest myself, I will say that it's one of a few games that I've seen an outpouring of love from all of you citizens in the nation of Nindie. It's still new, so don't expect a huge discount, but it's seen consistent support from Merge Games and now has a Metacritic of over 80. So if you're looking for something dark, gruesome, and pretty new to hack and slash your way through, Morbid is now 30% off for $17.49. And we'll wrap up the deals this week with an oldie but a goodie for anyone who wants a simple but fun auto-running platformer that's great for some pick-up-and-play action. Miles & Kilo is exactly that formula, with levels that can take as little as 20 seconds to complete, but it still offers a ton of replay value and varied environments. It really gets challenging, and it's constantly throwing new mechanics at you too. Miles & Kilo is currently 75% off, and at $1.99, it's an excellent addition to almost any Switch. You know the deal, let me know what you're picking up, and of course, if you see any other good deals, post them in the YouTube comments or share them in the Deals channel on the Nindie Nation Discord. If you don't know how to get to the Nindie Nation Discord, by the way, there will now be a link posted in the YouTube description as well as on my Twitter bio at Nindie Nation. With that, my friends, we're at the end of our typical run of show, but with it being episode 100, we'll take a few minutes to chat with you, hear some questions, hear about your favorite or hidden gem Nindies, that sort of stuff. If you don't want to stick around, well, thank you for stopping by this week, and we'll see you next week. And if you are sticking around, Maestro, cue up some music. Okay. Throwing the script out the window now. Let's jump into some comments from all of you. We'll do this all casual-like. Cool? James Pilcher shouts out One Finger Death Punch as a favorite for some quick pick-up-and-play kung fu action. And he loves the twin-stick shooters like Enter the Gungeon, Neon Chrome, that's a great hidden gem. Riddled Corpses EX, and Synthetic Ultimate. I totally agree on all of those. And as for some games that he found through Nindie Nation and ended up loving, Graceful Explosion Machine, Sky Rogue, and Dicey Dungeons all made the list. Yeah, we've talked about those quite a bit, haven't we? James also asks how I define Nindies, referencing specifically things like CD Projekt Red, who are obviously huge. So I do try to traditionally stick to the definition that a Nindie developer or an indie developer is a company that is mostly self-funding. They aren't owned or significantly helped by a big AAA publisher. And so in this case, I think CD Projekt Red did have a publisher. Didn't they have like 2K or something for the Witcher series? But then technically they're more indie now because they are doing it all themselves. And we see how that went. That's a tricky one, but I do typically look at just about any type of self-funded development. I think some of the outliers are like Ubisoft with Child of Light, or with Square Enix and their games like I Am Setsuna, or what was the other one? I can't think of it off the top of my head, but they made like 3 different retro classic RPGs. I Am Setsuna was pretty fun. Anyways, Those type of games where a big AAA publisher is incubating a small team that has this like indie idea, I do still typically count those as indies, but for the most part, when I'm making the list every week, I open up every new game that's listed on Nintendo's website, and I just scroll down, and if I see a publisher that's clearly a larger company, that's usually when I step back, and I just kind of draw the line between the massive companies and the smaller, lesser-known companies. I hope that makes sense. A very frequent commenter, Trwijbenja, or Trwijbenga. Whew. I don't know how people pronounce these names. Also commenting and has really enjoyed Black Paradox, a great cyberpunk trifecta, and Donut County, and he's picked up some great deals on games like Moonlighter, Swords of Ditto, Hades, and Cat Quest. Ugh, I just finished Cat Quest 2. Loved it. He mentions playing more games because of Nindie Nation, and honestly, that's probably the best comment I could ever hear, because that means that you're trying new things and enjoying them enough to keep coming back, so thank you for that. He also asks about if I annoy my wife while recording the trifecta, and especially tonight, there was a lot of trifecta yelling. It's the only thing that she hears when I record, or at least she says, so that's good, but especially if you listen to some earlier episodes, you'll notice how much more excited I started sounding around maybe episode 40. That's when I moved to the basement to start recording instead of our dining room, like right below my kids' bedrooms. So when I did that, I started letting loose a bit more. She hears the yells, but she never otherwise complains about them or the recording of Nindie Nation. Also, Trwijbenja, shout out to your comment about, the comments section. He mentioned how great it's been getting to know people in the comments, and I totally agree. I love chatting with everybody every week and then seeing how everybody joins Nindies at night and so forth. Hopefully with the Discord server now, we can keep that conversation going even more. And finally, he asks about my line of work, which is something a lot of you have asked, and that's totally cool. I told you anything goes. So I have, as a career, I have spent most of it in marketing, but primarily sales, working in enterprise cloud software. I've sold for some of the largest software companies in the world. I've sold for some smaller niche companies. And now, recently at least, I am working in cybersecurity. So one of the things that I help people do is understand how we can help remote work be safe and secure for their employees. If you imagine, that is it's an industry that, well, it's been pretty beneficial the last year. I would have never expected that kind of boom or this kind of environment to fall in my lap just a couple of years after moving to this current job. So, a blessing in disguise, I guess you could say. But yeah, for my entire career, I have focused on meeting with people and coming up with ideas and helping execute plans and things like that. And I typically have worked with really large organizations. Actually, while it's a very romantic and idolized version of a bygone era, my job is kind of a lot like Mad Men, but not nearly as cool and not nearly as much drinking. But I did spend a lot of time in the automotive industry, and when I did that, just about everybody was smoking or drinking at any given time. Customers, at least. Kevin, I'm gonna say Kevin, dished out my thoughts exactly about Juicy Realm, so I'm glad you're loving it, Kevin. He also asks about and compliments the branding of the channel. I appreciate all the compliments, and almost everything you see, whether it's the layout, the video templates, the overall branding, is just kind of spur of the moment stuff that I get laser focused on and try to knock out in an evening when the idea strikes. Actually, my co-host, Josh, from the first 30 or so episodes, is the one that made the first batch of logos. I've been tinkering with a complete redesign for weeks now, but it's a ways off with no timeline. I am working on it in my limited spare time, so we'll get there eventually. Kevin also asks about my line of work, but I think I hopefully addressed that. And he also asks about kind of how the show came to its current state and my background that helps me with it, or that kind of thing. While I don't think it's my profession that helped me make Nindie Nation, that's not really, well, I guess working from home helps a lot. I have been a musician all my life. I've recorded music, I've played a bunch of different instruments, I've played in bands, I've even helped little indie bands produce some of their own music, and I actually like making other people's music sound better, almost more than I like making it my own. I don't do much of it anymore, or at least right now with 2 little kids and whatnot, and obviously there not being much of a live music scene right now. But that's where my desire for a decent level of production in the show comes from. I know my way around audio production fairly well, even if a lot of that knowledge and experience is well over a decade old now. But I've always thought of Nindie Nation as somewhere between a podcast and a scripted YouTube video, at least in this current form. It definitely takes a lot more work than a podcast, and that's why I generally refer to it as a show instead of a podcast. But other than that, I mean, I'm just a random average dude with a little audio background that started loving indie games a few years ago when actually it was the guys at the Nintendo Village that asked Josh if he knew anyone who would be interested in starting up a podcast. And things just kind of evolved from there. I helped come up with the idea for the podcast and ultimately became the host of it. And, one thing led to another. And around that episode 36, I think, or so, was when I kind of shifted it to less of a discussion and more of a, boom, 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 here's the new releases, that kind of thing. And it just kind of evolved from there. Woozy Snakes and Osmos P both chimed in, with Sakuna being their favorite indie surprise of last year, and you guys have really sold me on that. I know I was the one that played it first, I think, but I loved what I played of it and just kind of fell off of it because of other things coming out. But every time I hear you two talk about it, Osmos and Woozy, you're gonna get me to go back into that game. It was wonderful, and I definitely need to get back in and finish that thing up. At least get more than like the 10 or so hours into it that I have. It was wonderful. Christy M asks, and by the way, I hope you all realize that I'm not just shouting out your names. I mean, I see all of you commenting every week, and I try to chat with everyone as much as possible. This isn't just like a listener mailbag or anything like that, so just wanted to throw that out there. Anyways, Christy asks, do I have any pets? While I grew up my entire life as mostly a dog person, grew up with 2 little dogs in the house. Actually, most of my adult life, I have had cats, and they have been named after references from Grey's Anatomy. So I had a cat named Izzy, and then she passed a few years ago. And then we got 2 new cats named Callie and Stevens, which are also Grey's references. And unfortunately, Stevens passed a couple of years ago. Super weird freak accident. Really weird. But about a year ago, we had some friends whose son developed a cat allergy out of nowhere, and they had to find a home for their 15-year-old cat. And, we had just lost Stevens, and we knew that nobody else would want to adopt such an old cat. So we figured we'd take him in. So we've got Mason as well. So now we have Callie and Mason. Callie is a chubby, I'm sorry, girl. She's sitting right beside me. She's a chunky, just American domestic, super average run-of-the-mill cat. And Mason is a 15-year-old, tuxedo cat, black and white cat. Pretty standard, average cats. And so yeah, mostly cat people now. But I have a feeling that as my son gets a little bit older, I have a feeling that there's a dog in our future, probably in the next couple of years. Your Mom and Them Boys. One of my favorite handles to read. Just so, I don't know. I love seeing Your Mom and Them Boys every week. Asks about some of my favorite Nindies. So obviously there's the Best of 2020 series that's going on right now. So episode 3 of that, or part 3 of that, is coming soon, hopefully this week. And then I also often reference my 3 Cs that I love so much. So that is Children of Mana, Crosscode, and Cosmic Star Heroine, 3 RPGs that for some reason all start with C that I absolutely love. And then there's also guilty pleasures like Vertical Drop Heroes and this other mobile port called Dungeon Stars that I got sucked into. Of course, all of the greats, Hades and Shovel Knight and all those things. But really, if you want to know what my favorite Nindies are, most of the time those are the games that are in the deals section. I rarely will recommend a game in the deals section unless I really had a good time with it. And even then, if I didn't think the game was outstanding, that's usually when I say, hey, it's only $1.99. If you're into this kind of game, check it out. That's usually a really good way. Also, if you want to see more of my favorite Nindies from the last few years, check out the Nindies We Love series. I've done like 5 or 6 of those videos. Before the show really started taking off, I was churning one of those out every month or two. Those are where you can find a lot of my other favorite Nindies, so go check them out. And Boobie McGee, one of my other favorite stupid handles on YouTube, and the combination with the icon, just mwah, chef's kiss. Boobie McGee chimed in about the way I handle the shameless shovelware, and look, I've promised not to take any money, not to ask for money, not to take ads. I just don't want to deal with any of that. So at the end of the day, it's my word and the things that I say surrounding it that would keep most people coming back. I try to call things like it is and make sure that I try to make things a little bit more entertaining because, you know, just saying things like this game, trash, this game, trash, this game, trash, that wouldn't be very fun. I tell you though, it's tough when you have a week like we did last week where there's just so much garbage, but then again, it's great when we have weeks like this week, so it all balances out. And when games aren't the best, try to poke fun at them. Ron Gorsuch bought a boatload of indies from the most recent sale, but man, this list is awesome. Go check out his comment. Minute, Rogue Legacy, Distropolis, Katana Zero. I mean, the list goes on. Great list of games. And as he said, one of the best parts about indies is how you can get so many of them for such a reasonable investment. You've got a dozen games there that you probably spent like $50 or so on, and they're going to last you for months. And then Brendan Foley said something stupid, but he says something stupid pretty much every week. By the way, if you ever see me giving him crap, whether it's in the comments or on Nindies at Night, Brendan lived on my couch during college, not because he was homeless or anything, mind you, but just because we were always playing video games all night. So I give him crap because we go way back personally. I always hope nobody thinks I'm just being a total dick to this random commenter. However, with Brendan, that is kind of funny to think about. Sorry, Brendan. But I think that's it for now. I hope the chat was good. I hope you got some more info on the kind of stuff you're looking for. Thanks for 100 episodes. Whether you were one of the only who's been here since the very beginning, and I see you, Gani, or if this is your first episode, thank you. You know what to do. Go check out the Nintendo Village, come back for Nindies at Night on Thursday, and the next Best of 2020 video is finally coming out this week. And also go join the Discord. Can't forget that, it's brand new. Go join the Discord, come chat with us. Next week, I get to talk about a game that I have been loving for the past few days, and I can't wait to share. But that's enough talky for today. It's time to go play some video games. Until next week, friends, I'm Jeff. This has been Nindie Nation episode 100. And remember, no matter what kind of game you're looking for, Nindie Nation will be right here for the next 100 episodes to help you find just the thing to keep your Joy-Cons synced.